In my last video, I spoke about America's media fatigue, which I do believe is clearly evident. We often get tired and burn out of the bullcrap going on, and I think there's a lot of things that we feel we can't change. But I came across an interesting article from Fox News in which Paul McCartney talked about how his music has brought together people from differing political views. And I believe that this serves as an example of how we can dial down the national temperature. And I would argue, ladies and gentlemen, that this is a must if we intend to survive as a nation. And it's a very interesting topic, given that we're coming up on our 250th national birthday. I want to read to you from Fox News. During an appearance on the latest episode of the Rest is Entertainment podcast, the Beatles legend 83 reflected on the valuable way classic songs like Hey Jude can bring people together with differing political views. Particularly these days, you do something like Hey Jude, and you see this whole audience singing together, McCartney said, of playing the iconic Beatles song at a recent show in Los Angeles. I mean, in Trump's America, and the Republicans and Democrats all at each other's throats. When we do that song, they're not. They're all loving it, and it's like, wow, that's pretty amazing. I believe Paul McCartney is on to something, even though I would disagree, and mostly anybody who's been paying attention would disagree. This polarization is not purely a symptom of, quote, Trump's America. This polarization has happened at least over the past few decades, but I believe it's been exacerbated by the chronic online attitude that people have today in social media. This polarization and this my side versus yours mentality. We're all Americans here, and we can't survive, ladies and gentlemen, if we're at each other's throats. If we refuse to humble ourselves and listen to one another. Doesn't matter if we agree or not, but if we're not seeing the humanity in our neighbors, then that's a hard problem. And I believe that from all these political assassinations and calls for violence, that's where it starts. It starts in the hearts and minds of people, and it's got to stop. Nobody deserves to die for saying what they believe. Look at the assassination of Charlie Kirk. Look at the many attempts of assassination on President Donald Trump. I don't care where you line up politically. If you think that is okay, that is wrong. And that is evil in your heart. I don't want anyone to die for what they believe. And that should not be a controversial opinion, my friends. We were founded on the ideas that a man could speak his mind without fear of political violence. And it is my belief that if America falls, if we squander our national inheritance, this threat will come because we have torn ourselves apart, not from an outside adversary. We need to dial the temperatures down. I have an interesting clip I want to show you, and then I want to show you what I believe is an example of how we can dial down this national temperature and start seeing the humanity in one another once again. But before I do, I want to play this clip of former Senator Ben Sasse. He was asked by 60 Minutes about what he believed was the problem with America's national politics today. And I believe there's some wisdom in what Ben Sasse had to say. I want you to listen to it, and then I'll continue talking about it, because I believe we can glean some important wisdom from this. Take a look.
Is it social media that's destroyed the politics that we've known? It's a central piece of it. Maybe let's back up a tiny little bit. I think capitalism is the most glorious economic system the world has ever known. Capitalism is not the same as consumerism. And one of the things about the largesse that post-1945 global capitalism has created for really rich American middle-class folks is a sense that maybe more and more consumption can make you happier, and that's definitely not true. And yet, we're really rich, and so we're distracted by consumerism, and one side effect of consumerism is pure segregation. And so I think one of the fundamental things that's wrong in America is young people don't know old people, and old people don't get to serve young people. There's a lot that's glorious about being 13 or being 17 or being 21, but one pretty terrible thing would be to be 15 or 17 and think 15 and 17-year-olds have wisdom, because 15 and 17-year-olds don't have fully formed frontal lobes. They don't have wisdom. And one of the things 15 and 17-year-olds need is 60-year-olds and 80-year-olds in their life. And so pure segregation is, I think, a fundamental sociological problem in America, and social media is like dumping gas on that, where we create incredible short-term incentives to do and think and kind of bubble yourself into something that implies only your narrow demographic cohort or identity politics or market niche is where life is lived. And so I do think social media is one of the fundamental problems that we're dealing with right now. Right now, almost all politicians' impulses and incentives, because of social media or because of just the cheap barrier to entry to any kind of media, is to go narrow but deep and to do a lot of fan service. It doesn't encourage a lot of self-scrutiny. It doesn't encourage a lot of humility. It doesn't encourage someone saying, you know what, I used to believe this, but I listened to somebody else and I realized I was wrong and I've learned this new thing. There's no audience for that. You want to just say more of we're definitely right and they're definitely wrong, and that tribalism makes us pretty stupid.
Is it social?
The Lord told us in Scripture that a kingdom divided against itself cannot stand. And I would add to what former Senator from Nebraska, Ben Sass, said, and tell you that a great symptom, maybe even a root cause to this polarization that we're seeing, is our own arrogance. To think that I have it all right and that our neighbors are just fools. Instead, I offer to you this solution: to look at someone not as your political enemy, but as your neighbor, as your fellow American, and reach out to people who disagree with you. Try to bond over something as simple as music, like what Paul McCartney said. If we can all unite over the Beatles and what a great impact they had. If you look at their musical catalog, some of the best songs, especially from their later years, were Come Together, and We Can Work It Out. And if you look at the time in which these songs were written, the 1960s were very, very divisive. We saw riots, we saw assassinations, and I believe that in some ways, today's era is rhyming, unfortunately. We have to be a moral people. We cannot slit our own throats. And I'm here to tell you, no matter how much I disagree with someone, I will not allow myself to look at my fellow American as an enemy. If we die as a nation, God forbid, it will not come from an outside threat, but because we have slit our own throats. And that starts when we start looking at our fellow Americans as the enemy. We must learn to live together on this planet. We don't have to agree about everything, but we should be able to have decent conversations and put aside our own arrogance and practice some humility. And maybe, just maybe, we can learn something And we can certainly dial down the temperatures before we boil ourselves alive. You know, I learned something when I watched an important documentary about a blues musician named Daryl Davis some years ago. And if you're not familiar with Daryl Davis, he was a blues musician, I believe in Memphis, Tennessee. And this man befriended over 200 members of the Ku Klux Klan. And eventually, after he talked to them and became their friend, they resigned voluntarily from the Ku Klux Klan, and he would keep their robes that they gifted to him as a souvenir. How did he do that? Just by talking and showing love, and showing that even though he was a black man, and that they had these preconceived notions, that some ridiculous idea that blacks were inferior to them, because he was willing to be their friend, over time they changed their mind. I submit to you, do not be so arrogant to think that you have everything figured out. And do not look at your neighbor as your enemy. There are far more dangerous people that want this country divided, because as I told you, a kingdom divided against itself cannot stand. We must realize that even though we disagree, that each individual has a right to live the way they want to live. And that maybe if we look at each other as human beings and humble ourselves, we can learn something from one another. And we will certainly be able to survive perhaps another 250 years. That's what I'm here for. I hope that you were able to glean something from this video. I hope that you would go out and try to make friends with people who disagree with you. Because I'm here to tell you, when you stop putting people in ideological boxes and you start seeing them as individuals made by the same God who loves them, with the same dignity, just maybe a little bit different belief than you, when you start seeing them with that same dignity and you start with that foundation, then you can find something to agree on. And maybe you disagree on an issue, but you can disagree in harmony. And that must be done if we intend to survive. If you agree with me that we have to dial down this national temperature if we want to survive, and that political violence is always wrong, do me a favor. Share this video so that more people see it wherever you can. Like it so it helps out the algorithm so more people see it. And subscribe to my channel, because I want to see an army of people who are committed to preserving truth, freedom, and the American way. And I don't care if you disagree with me or not. I'm open, I'm listening, and I'm your friend. I believe that if we do not do this, we will be the generation that is held responsible for the sacrifice of the best nation the world has ever seen. Thank you, and God bless. I'll see you in the next video.